All right. Welcome to the Too Much to Say podcast, where we've got too much to say. Episode 13, Tolerance, Intolerance, and the Intolerance of Intolerance. If you can catch all that. Got a good episode for you today. Gonna talk a little bit about current affairs, surprise, surprise. Our boy Trump um continues down his fascist path, I guess. We're actually just going to go ahead and hop into the weekly random. I hope you're joining us here on twitch.tv/Hector Meow. We are live. If you're not, welcome to the podcast. But let's go ahead and, like I said, let's hop into the weekly random. We're going to start off back where we left off with Trump and immigration. This past week, Trump gave a speech. I'm not really sure how it was. I mean, it was sort of an event, to be honest. A propaganda event. He basically trotted out 11 families. Actually, 14 families. Excuse me, 14 families. 11 of them holding pictures of their deceased loved ones. Who he calls them angel families because they have lost a loved one to an illegal immigrant. Now, there are a couple issues with this. Firstly, I guess I'll just set the backdrop. It kind of reminds me of like an NFL backdrop. It has big words: secure our borders, protect our families. So, basically, I guess like I said, I have a few issues with this. Number one, he's politicized. He is taking advantage of these people. I know that apparently they're willing to do it, but I feel like he's just taking immigration, which should be a nuanced discussion, where each side, has valid points, and he is sensationalizing it, and making it really he's trying to make it a black and white issue where it's really a gray issue. He's trying to make it us versus them, the white Americans versus them, the undocumented immigrants. These, he, as he said in previous tweets, who are infesting our country. That word, I know I mentioned it last time, but that word just fucking infuriates me. No human should be saying that another human infests anything. If anything infests anything, that's a word we use when we talk about bugs, insects. If anything infests anything, it is this idea. It's bigotry. Bigotry infests humans. White supremacy. Anytime anyone is prejudiced, that's an infestation. It's a rot at the core of humanity, and our boy Trump is, man, he's prime. Anyway, so Trump trotted them all out there, and had each of them tell their story. I think out of the 14, one of them, who is kind of vague about her story, but she said that her son was apparently tortured and killed. I didn't, like I said, it was rather vague. But all of the others, if I'm remembering correctly, you can find this on YouTube, just Trump's speech on immigration, to back me up or say that I'm lying here, or just remembering incorrectly. All of the others died to car accidents. None of them were violent crimes except the one, and like I said, she was pretty vague. And I feel like, and to go back to one of our previous discussions where we talked about, dishonesty, um, I feel like this is lying. This is deceiving, intentional deceiving. It's painting a picture, basically calling undocumented immigrant or immigrants, criminals. They're all criminals. It they all cause death and destruction wherever they go. Car accidents, like, that shit happens. I drive on Atlanta roads every single day on the highways, and man, there's a counter on how many people have died. That thing, I mean, it every year it breaks 1,000. On how many people have died on I think it's Georgia roads, but it's over 1,000. So that means more than 3 people a day die on Georgia roads. I'm not saying it's not a tragedy. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to belittle these people having lost their loved one. But the moment they start to compare one injustice to another, because the whole point of this was to say, we lost our loved ones permanently thanks to an illegal immigrant, so we need to kick all the immigrants out of, or all these illegal immigrants out of our country because I lost my loved one permanently, and it's okay for them to lose their loved ones temporarily because this goes back to the children being separated from the parents thanks to Trump's how does he phrase it? Why can't I think of it? Trump's man. Why am I blanking here? It's the no, zero tolerance. Damn, zero tolerance of illegal immigration, and because of zero tolerance, within the last like 6 weeks, like 20,000 children have been separated from their parents, and that is horrifying. And to bring these parents out and parade them out there to bend their experiences to try to prove a point is just asinine. All right, so to prove my point, I pulled up like I said, it's asinine regardless of anything to try to take them and to twist emotion to make us to bend emotions against these children being separated from their parents. Two wrongs. This is something they teach you when you're like in kindergarten. Two wrongs do not make a right. Taking children or people losing their children does not make permanently due to death does not make it right to separate parents from their children. I mean, there's stuff coming out now where the kids are being told, don't talk to the media about this. Like, they're being threatened. Like, right now, I mean, this one's by Rachel Maddow. I recommend looking it up. I mean, it's just terrifying. And this doesn't even say anything about our girl, Melania Trump, going out there with a jacket on that says, "I don't care." This presidency is a caricature of everything that's wrong with America, and yet people don't give a fuck. It's amazing. But let me pull up this to Trump's point. Trump's point basically is that illegal immigrants are they're more dangerous. They cause more crime than naturalized citizens. Well, this coming from the Cato Institute back in 2018 about crime in Texas. Hold on, let me bring this up. There we are. So undocumented immigrants, according to this chart, and there's not really any other way to read it, so the title of the chart is Undocumented Immigrants Commit Less Crime Than Native-born Citizens. And this is criminal conviction rates in Texas per 100,000 population. This is in 2015, I thought it was 2015, but it was put together in 2018. So for all crimes, there's roughly 1,750 convictions per 100,000 for native-born Americans. For undocumented immigrants, it's around 750. For legal immigrants, it's around 250. For homicide, we're slightly under 4 for native-born. We're slightly under 3 for undocumented immigrants, and we're about 0.5 for legal immigrants. And as for larceny or theft, you have 300 per 100,000 for native-born. Looks to be about 75 for undocumented immigrants, and less than probably about 25 for legal immigrants. And I mean, this is just Texas. This is just 2015. But this is pulling data for the entire state of Texas, which you have to admit is going to be one of the states with the highest amount of immigration, illegal and legal. And the stats are pretty clear. Not only are illegal and legal immigrants not more likely to commit crime than native-born citizens, they're less likely. It is simply rhetoric. Fascist, racist rhetoric that this administration has employed since before it was an administration, when it was a campaign. And it's his attempts, I guess, to poison us against other people, to bring himself up. I don't think Trump. I mean, in the last podcast, we talked a little bit about Trump being compared to Hitler, pre World War II, obviously, to like 1920s. And I don't think that he's that smart. I mean, maybe I'm selling him short here, but I don't think he's that smart. So I think it's more just narcissism. I think it's just he knows that people will like him if he says these things, and that's his goal. I mean, it is possible that it is Hitler-esque. I mean, the messages are definitely, there's no doubt about that. It's definitely this fascist bullshit. But I mean, to give him the benefit of the doubt, I think it's more about narcissism than fascism. But fascism kind of works his way, because at the end of the day, if he could, he would, as he said in the past, like to be like Kim Jong-un. He'd like to be a dictator. I mean, he is constantly, kind of revered people who have taken over. I mean, he congratulated Erdogan in the past. He's congratulated, like I said, he's revered. He's wanted his people to be like North Koreans when they, revere Kim Jong-un, despite the fact that it's all about terror and not actually anyone caring about him. He really loves Putin. But I think it's more about narcissism than actual fascism. I think. Any way you look at it is just, awful. All right. Next, and this is going to be kind of, this week was a banner terrible week for the Supreme Court of the United States. And this has just been I think it's today and yesterday that they've kind of delivered these 3, in many ways, blows to our democracy. The first one, without a doubt, is a blow to our democracy. Democracy is all about fair voting. It's all about voting and that being fair and being a positive process. There was a case brought to the Supreme Court about gerrymandering in North Carolina and Texas. Now, gerrymandering is basically where the people in power create voting districts that favor their party. basically they can misrepresent their votes. They can make it to where, if an area, is a large area is 75% Democrat, they would be able to configure that to where they could probably get 2 representatives where they should have 0 if it was just broken up by arbitrary or relatively normal means. And they ruled in favor of that. Then, mind you, this is very significant because of the Republicans' gambit at the end of Obama's presidency saying he shouldn't be allowed to nominate a judge. He's a lame duck president. He wasn't. So they basically blocked him and made it so that they could get Neil Gorsuch in, who's now. Gerrymandering only hurts America. I don't care which side does it. Democrats, Republicans, it only hurts America. And right now, it's the Republicans hurting America. I don't care who you are. If you think this is a good thing, you are part of the problem. And that's part of and the Supreme Court is now part of the problem. Thanks to the Republicans, making the Supreme Court not an unbiased, it should be apolitical. It's not anymore. I mean, that came out, and then the next two to fall was the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, where basically this cake shop in Colorado denied a gay couple a wedding cake based on their basically religious preferences. And they overturned that in the Supreme Court, saying that the county had basically misrepresented these people, because the guy who came out, he said, he denies cakes to people. If you're going to say something negative about gays, I'm not going to make that cake. But I also don't support homosexual marriage, so I'm not going to make that cake either. Well, it made it all the way up there because being homosexual is actually a protected class, essentially, where you can't discriminate against them. And so they basically, it was actually a 7-2, but the dissenters, and we'll get to the next one. So they said basically that the county had not acted in good faith, and they had misrepresented the arguments of this person, saying that the person had said a lot of negative things about homosexuals, which was not true. But he had, in fact, discriminated against homosexuals. So I'm not sure how that changes anything. Anyway, so next they go to the travel ban, which they ruled for Trump, saying that, yes, their argument was basically, yes, Trump does have the authority to do this. But what they didn't take into account was the fact that basically Trump has the authority to ban people based on national security, for national security reasons, and that's 100% true. He's a president, he does. However, he wasn't doing it for national security. Not in the slightest. He had told us repeatedly in his tweets that this was about banning Muslim. He called it the Muslim ban. That is discrimination against religion. Pure and simple. This is what Sotomayor said in her dissent against both of these. She said, unlike in Masterpiece, where the majority considered the state commissioners, not county, state commissioners' statements about religion to be persuasive as evidence of unconstitutional government action, the majority here completely sets aside the president's charged statements about Muslim as irrelevant. This comes from Judge Sotomayor, one of the Supreme Court justices, in her dissent about the Masterpiece and the travel ban. They basically had double standards to twist the law, and this is as the Supreme Court, to twist the law to get what they wanted. I'm having difficulties turning this in a different way. I don't know how to view this otherwise. I view this as making the Supreme Court political, and that is horrible. The whole point of the Supreme Court is to uphold the Constitution of the United States and its amendments. It is not to bring Republican or Democrat biased ideals. I mean, technically the Constitution should be the ideals of both parties. The Republicans are sure proven that's not the case, and that's, I don't know, it's horrible to see it, and I sure hope that Trump doesn't get to pick another Supreme Court justice before the end of his term. I hope that they can hold out. All right, that brings us to the end of the weekly random. And into the Reddit shower thought of the week. Now, this one comes from user Blood of Gore, and he says, "Your future self is talking shit about you." I don't know if that's motivating or if it's encouraging. I think it's encouraging. Your future self, well, I guess your future self could just be a dick, but the idea here, hopefully, is that your future self's a better person and looks back and is like, damn, I was stupid. And I think that's the goal, right? Is to be able to do that. And that in 5 years, I'll look back and be like, damn, Sam was a dumbass. I should have done this, and this better. I think that's the hope. All right. And go ahead and feel free to hit us up with if you see a Reddit shower thought that you like better than ones I've been sharing. Go ahead and hit us up on Twitch in the DMs, or on Twitter. I'm at Real Sam Shannon. You can hit me up in my DMs with a Reddit shower thought you like, or if you disagree with anything I say here as well. And it'll definitely be taken into account. But I definitely will be doing the best. All right, let's hop in to the main event, which today is Tolerance, Intolerance, and the Intolerance of Intolerance. Because I think this is rather applicable. Because I actually did skip one of the more entertaining news events of this past week so that I could talk about it here. Let me bring up Sarah Huckabee Sanders' tweet. This comes at us on the 23rd. Come on, little guy. Get bigger. There we go. This is coming at us on June 23rd, where on the 22nd, she says, "Last night I was told by the owner of the Red Hen in Lexington, Virginia, to leave because I work for POTUS, the President of the United States, and I politely left. Her actions say far more about her than about me. I always do my best to treat people, including those I disagree with, respectfully, and will continue to do so." So basically, she went to a restaurant and they told her, because you work for a bigot and you represent that bigot, we're going to kick you out. And if you look at the Washington Post, actually has a really great article about this, basically explaining that. I guess I can leave the tweet up a little bit. Basically explaining that, getting the point of view from the Red Hen's owner, saying, she basically says that, her employees messaged her. She was home. Home when Sarah Sanders comes in. If you don't know who Sarah Sanders is, she's the press secretary for the President of the United States. She was at home when she came in. She didn't believe it. Her employees said they're uncomfortable because she has a couple of gay employees, and we all know how Trump feels about transgenders. And so she comes in. She didn't believe it. She's like, "All right, I'll come in. I'll come see it." And sure enough, it was Sarah Huckabee Sanders in the flesh. And she asked her employees, "How do you feel about this?" And they said, I'm uncomfortable. She said, do you want me to, I can ask her to leave. Is that what you want? They said, yes. Now, I mean, it is, and she even says, I'm a business person. I don't like to cause an uproar, but it was basically it was something she felt she had to do. Now, I want to compare what just happened, to that Supreme Court case that we just missed, that just got over, which was for that masterpiece cake shop, where they denied the homosexual couple a wedding cake. What is the difference between the two things? Why is it okay to kick for the Red Hen to kick Sarah Huckabee Sanders out of their restaurant because they disagree with who she works with, what she represents? And if that's okay, is it okay to kick homosexuals out of your bakery because you don't like their sexual orientation? Yeah, basically let's dive into that. I guess to give a spoiler, it's not okay. It's not okay to tell homosexuals you can't have a. But let's discuss why. And this is something I was discussing with my wife the other day, and she actually disagrees. She thinks that both are wrong, essentially. So, but let's talk about the two different things. So, what is tolerance? We throw tolerance around a lot. Well, first off, there's a difference between acceptance and tolerance. So, so the definition of tolerance is the ability or willingness to tolerate something, in particular, the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with. Under that definition, I do not tolerate homosexuals because I accept homosexuals. I don't have to tolerate them. So basically, if the masterpiece baker had made that cake for the homosexual couple, that would have been tolerance, which he did not have. Because for some reason Christians don't generally show tolerance. They rather they show intolerance, which by definition is the unwillingness to accept views, beliefs, or behavior that differ from one's own. All forms of racism, this is mine, I think. All forms of racism, prejudice, discrimination. And discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. Prejudicial. Wow, struggled through that one. All right, so let's take that. Let's start to take these words and put them together. The tolerance of intolerance. So that would be the ability or willingness to tolerate the unwillingness to accept views, beliefs, or behavior that differ from one's own. So some examples in history, and I'm going to be honest, I'm going to go extreme because they're just the ones that pop out. Pre-World War II Germany and pre-World War II the world. Everyone who accepted what Germany was doing, especially once they moved on to Poland and essentially started World War II. Pre-Civil War Northern United States. There were a lot of people who were abolitionists, and yet they allowed the Southerners to continue to have slavery because they didn't want to risk the United States breaking. Because essentially that's what happened, and that's what started the Civil War. Was finally they said enough is enough, or even actually the South said enough is enough, and they wanted to keep slavery, and so the North said, no, we want to keep you, and slavery's got to go. Um, basically, the question here is, at what point is not standing against something you disagree with the effective same as standing with them? An example of this for me is the election of Trump, and everyone who allowed the narratives of Trump is no worse than Hillary to kind of abound. I mean, I actually feel culpable in this case. People blew Hillary's imperfections out of proportion. I mean, I'm not saying that she's perfect in any way, shape, or form, but the fact that she, made the snafu with Benghazi and the emails, the buttery mails, like they allowed that to overcome so many flaws for Trump. And like I said, at some point, are you not complicit in what Trump has done if you don't stand up against it? All right. The intolerance of intolerance. The unwillingness to accept. The unwillingness to accept views, beliefs, or behavior that differ from one's own. The Civil War is a great example of this. It was finally when the North put their foot down, and I know that Lincoln's main reason for the Civil War was to keep the North, keep the United States together. But at the end of the day, one of the things that they accomplished was to eradicate slavery in the United States. Another great example of this is the Civil Rights Movement. People finally, America, we struggle. We struggle, but we get it right. I think. I mean, I don't even think it's right yet, because interestingly enough, all three of these are going to be all three of my examples for the intolerance of intolerance is the United States and civil rights. We have the Civil War. We have the Civil Rights Movement. And to be honest, NFL kneeling, I think it's a great example of the intolerance of intolerance. It's people. It was NFL players standing up and saying, all these deaths caused by the police of, essentially black youth and black people is not acceptable. I mean, Colin Kaepernick, whatever you think about him, essentially sacrificed his career. And I think there's been some great injustices done by the media, by President Trump, regarding Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed and every other NFL player that kneeled their protest. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. I think we talked about it earlier, that what form of protest is okay with you, but the way they've treated it and the way they took it and they bent it and they manipulated it to say this is them being anti-American because they're kneeling for the national anthem. That is absolutely ridiculous. There's nothing anti-American about kneeling for injustice during the national anthem. I think it's a great example of intolerance of intolerance, and I think it's fantastic. All right, and the last iteration, so we had tolerance of intolerance, intolerance of intolerance, and now intolerance of tolerance. So a great example of this, so this is the unwillingness to accept others' ability or willingness to tolerate something, in particular the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with. Trump's response to the kneeling is a great example. A lot of people's response, not just Trump. He is complicit, of course, because he can't leave anything alone. But so on Fox and Friends, this is what Trump says: "You have to stand proudly for the national anthem, or shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there," Trump added. "Maybe you shouldn't be in the country. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem And the NFL owners did the right thing. This is after the anthem, after they put into place the requirement to stand during the anthem or stay in the locker room. Like I said, Trump is a great example of intolerance of tolerance. However, he is in no way alone on how the NFL kneeling went down. The amazing amount of people who viewed this as an anti-American, who were willing to buy into the rhetoric that this is anti-American, is ridiculous. And the fact that police brutality didn't really get the light. I mean, they were able to twist this protest against police brutality to essentially nullify it, and that is sickening. That should sicken all of us. That people's voice were not heard about a very, very important subject. I think it's absolutely appalling, to be quite honest. Another great example of intolerance of tolerance was people's response to Rosa Parks when she, sat down on the bus and said she wouldn't get up. I think, and this is one of the things I actually learned while prepping for this podcast, was that Rosa Parks didn't actually sit in the white person's part of the bus. She didn't sit in the white person's part of the bus. She actually sat in the colored portion of the bus. She sat back on the first row of chairs behind the white part of the bus, which apparently was overflow for white people when it got full. And then when a white person came and asked her for a seat, she said, "No, I'm not moving." And at that point, she was arrested. And after that, she was fired from her job. And after that, she couldn't find work around there and had to move first to Virginia and then to Detroit. And after that, during that, she received death threats. She received death threats for protesting segregation on a fucking bus. I'm sure Colin Kaepernick has received death threats about kneeling during the national anthem. Now that's me speculating about Colin Kaepernick, but I've heard plenty of terrible things about Colin Kaepernick from people. And if you think that he's not good enough to be one of the 32 quarterbacks in the league, or even one of the 64 being a backup, and you think that's all, that was just because he's not a good quarterback, you might be a bigot. Because you're wrong, or even better, you have absolutely no clue about the NFL. And you're looking at the NFL and talent through your own, some very, very skewed, eyes, because the man took the 49ers to the Super Bowl and then was out of the league within 2 to 3 years, I believe it was. Yeah, that had nothing. That was all about his skill. It had nothing to do with the color of his skin or his protest. All right. So, basically, my argument, what I'm trying to say here, is that the instance of the bakery denying the homosexual couple a wedding cake for their wedding is intolerance and is incorrect. It's discrimination. Whereas the red hen was intolerance of intolerance. Now, you may ask, well, how is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, how is she intolerant? She's not Trump. I think it is absolutely impossible to take her away, out of. She is complicit in everything that Trump represents. She is the mouthpiece of Trump, or for lack of a better term, the mouthpiece of Sauron. And I think this picture here, I think it's pretty damn accurate. It's a great representation of Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Just Google "Mouth of Sauron" if you're on the pod. You're on the pod, not on Twitch. But my argument, let's go ahead and leave. We'll leave our boy up here for the duration. Is that she is complicit in every single thing that this administration represents. So let's just list a few of the things. Let's start off with something that happened, during the election. The grab her by the pussy video. So let's sexism, and let's from the transcript. He says, this is talking to Billy Bush. He says, "I did try and fuck her. She was married. I took her furniture. I moved on her like a bitch. I gotta use some Tic Tacs in case I start kissing her. I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy." So sexism, just run of the mill sexual assault that got completely glossed over while he was being elected. No big deal. No tolerance of immigration, so that would definitely be racism, discrimination against primarily Mexicans. Also, and that just happened. This zero tolerance is actually exactly what it's called. Zero tolerance immigration policy of Trump, and which his actions directly led to children being separated from their parents, which he has not fixed. Let's be clear on that. That happened and it has not been fixed. They are still separated, and he is still threatening to deport them. This is not fixed until every single child is back with their parent. His response to the NFL players kneeling, his ban of transgenders in the military. In 2016, he categorizes all Mexicans and immigrants as criminals and rapists. They are not sending their best. He has constantly used MS-13, which is a gang in Mexico, to disparage all immigrants. In 2015, Trump called for a complete shutdown of all Muslims entering the United States. That tweet that the Supreme Court neglected to use when they were considering his ban. They said, yeah, that tweet, that a complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. June 2017, Trump said 15,000 recent immigrants from Haiti all have AIDS, and that 40,000 Nigerians, once seen in the United States, would never go back to their huts in Africa. That's the president. That was last year while he was president. He said that. Okay. January 11th, 2018. Trump vulgarly called for less immigration from Haiti and Africa and more from Norway. If anyone's following along, Norway's white, and those other two are black, and that's why it's not okay. Just throwing that one out there. 2012, we had the Trump birther tweet about the then President of the United States, Barack Obama, with his normal Trumpian language. An extremely credible source has called my office and told me that Barack Obama's birth certificate is a fraud. A, no it's not. B, Everything you've ever said about Barack Obama was racist. Everything you said about his presidency, about him as a president, it's because you're a bigot. Moving on. August 2017, Trump described white supremacists in Charlottesville as very fine people. Isn't that nice? Well, that was a nice one. He also pardoned Joe Arpaio, who U.S. District Judge Susan Bolton found guilty for defying a Judge 2011 order to refrain from racially profiling Latinos during patrols and turning them over to federal immigration authorities. He was a sheriff in Arizona racially profiling Latinos, and Trump pardoned him. It's called racism. Okay. November 2017, meeting with Navajo veterans of World War II, Trump mocked Senator Elizabeth Warren, calling her Pocahontas. And last but not least on this list, I'm sure, if you have any others, please send them my way. He stood by sexual predator Roy Moore for the Senate seat in Alabama. So, Trump stands for sexism, racism, pedophilia, white supremacy, prejudice against transgenders. These are the things that Sarah Huckabee Sanders represents as the press secretary for the President of the United States. We, as a country, have the responsibility to stand against every single one of those things. Every single comment that I've listed today, we have a responsibility to be intolerant of that intolerance. And what she did, I say she. Hold on, give me a second. Let me do this right. There's no reason. Give me 1 second here. Let me grab Stephanie Wilkinson. That's her name. Stephanie Wilkinson, owner of the Red Hen. She deserves to have her name said because what she did was be intolerant of intolerance. We can all do that more. We all could have done it more during the election. I know I could have. I voted for the Libertarian, and it's not that I wanted Hillary to win, but I wish, and I live in Georgia, so my vote would not have changed, who won, who got the votes. But I could have been out there. I could have been out there, stumping for anyone but Trump. It's such an unfortunate stance to have to take. But I could have been out there, protesting Trump, helping people or trying to, convey the message. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast was thanks to our beloved President Donald Trump, was because I felt like I wasn't doing enough against him and his bigotry, his sexism, his racism, his prejudice against transgenders, and his support of white supremacy, and his support of pedophilia and Roy Moore. We cannot give up. We cannot forget. We cannot let this become the norm. The weekly random all happened in the last week. And every week it's something new. This is horrifying. We are living right now in the history that will be in. There will be a large section, just like when you go to American history, there's a large section about the Civil War and about the Civil Rights Movement. They're going to gloss over the 80s. They're going to gloss over the 90s, most of the 2000s, and they're going to hit hard on 2016, 15, 17, 18, this entire presidency. And how this turns out depends on us. We have the opportunity right now to make our decisions and to message our congressmen in droves, letting them know how displeased we are with their tolerance of intolerance. That's too much to say for this week. I could keep going because I have too much to say about this, and this one infuriates me. Um, if you're watching on Twitch, just take another gander at the mouth of Sauron. um, but thank you for listening. Wherever you're getting the pod, if it's on twitch.tv/HectorMeow, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, please hit us up with a follow, like, subscribe. Those 5 stars on iTunes. If you have anything you wanna hit me with, I'm on Twitter at RealSamShannon. Hit me up in my DMs. If you had ideas for pods, if you want to tell me, you disagree with me, you can DM me. You can just call me out on Twitter. I'm down. Get the word out, please. We cannot be, tolerant of intolerance any longer. It's gotten us this far. It can't get us any further. It has to stop. But thank you again, and I'll see you Thursday. Or sorry, this is Tuesday, so this Saturday will be another sports edition of Too Much to Say at 8:30 Eastern Time, twitch.tv/HectorMeow, or I'll be back on next Tuesday at 8:30 Eastern Time, or Wednesday, depending. It'll be Tuesday on Twitch, and then I try to get them up the next day. But again, thank you, and have a great week.